When God remembered us. A 10-year journey from barrenness to blessing. The wedding was beautiful. Daniel and Sarah stood before God and their loved ones, promising to love and cherish each other forever. As they danced that night, they whispered about the future, about the laughter of children filling their home, about tiny feet pattering across the floor, about bedtime stories and lullabies. They were young, in love, and full of dreams. But life had other plans. The waiting begins. Months passed. Then a year. Then 2. No pregnancy. At first, they brushed it off. God's time is the best, Sarah would say with a hopeful smile. But deep inside, a tiny seed of worry began to grow. Then the questions started. When will you give us a grandchild? Daniel's mother asked one evening, her tone sharp, her eyes filled with expectation. Sarah forced a smile. Soon, Mama. Keep praying for us. But as the years went by, the whispers turned into outright mockery. At family gatherings, Sarah could feel the stares, hear the hushed conversations that stopped when she walked in. One of Daniel's cousins sneered one night during dinner, his voice laced with cruel amusement. Maybe you should check yourself, Daniel. Are you even capable? Laughter erupted around the table. Daniel's jaw tightened, his hands clenched into fists under the table. He said nothing, but Sarah saw the hurt flash in his eyes. She, too, wasn't spared. Church, the one place she had sought comfort, became a source of pain. One Sunday, as she stood among the women after service, she heard the words that shattered her heart. A woman who cannot bear children is like a tree without fruit. The words cut deep, leaving an open wound. She bit her lip to stop the tears from spilling, but when she got home, she collapsed onto the floor and wept. The struggle and the shame. Daniel saw the pain in his wife's eyes. He saw how she avoided gatherings, how she smiled less, how the once vibrant woman he married was slowly fading under the weight of shame. He, too, carried the burden. The elders of his family called him aside one evening. A man must have a child to carry on his name, one of them said. Consider taking another wife. Daniel clenched his jaw, his heart pounding. Never, he said, his voice firm. Sarah is my wife. She is enough. But the pressure did not stop. Every conversation, every visit, came with subtle, or not so subtle, suggestions. Still, Daniel held firm. The last hope. They visited doctors, specialists, even herbalists, anyone who could offer a glimmer of hope. Each time, the results were the same. Unexplained infertility. They fasted. They prayed. They cried. Nothing. 10 years passed. 10 years of pain, mockery, and silent nights of holding each other, wondering if God had forgotten them. Then, one day, everything changed. The miracle. Sarah had given up on checking for pregnancy symptoms. She had lost count of the time she had taken a test, only to be crushed by a single, lonely line. But this time, something felt different. She was late. She told herself not to hope, not to dream. But her hands still trembled as she reached for the test. She closed her eyes, too afraid to look. Minutes passed. Slowly, she opened her eyes. 2 lines. Her breath hitched. Her vision blurred as tears filled her eyes. Daniel, she called, her voice shaking. Come here. He rushed in, his heart pounding. What's wrong? He asked. She turned the test toward him, her hand still unsteady. For a moment, he just stared. The room was silent, except for the sound of their uneven breaths. Then, his knees buckled. He fell to the ground, his hands covering his face as his body shook with sobs. God, thank you. Thank you. 9 months later, their home, once filled with silence, echoed with the cries of a newborn baby girl. The same people who mocked them now came bearing gifts. The same voices that whispered about them now rejoiced with them. At the naming ceremony, Sarah held her daughter close, tears slipping down her cheeks as she whispered, You were worth every tear, every prayer, every moment of waiting. And as Daniel wrapped his arms around his wife and child, he smiled and said, God's time is always perfect. Faith tested again, when miracles bring new challenges. The story continues, Part 2. The house was no longer silent, no longer filled with the weight of unanswered prayers. Laughter echoed in the rooms, tiny feet pattered across the floor, and little cries filled the nights. Sarah and Daniel's home had finally become what they had dreamed of, a place of joy. They named their daughter Miracle, because that was exactly what she was. A testament to God's faithfulness. But they soon realized that while their battle with barrenness was over, their journey of faith had only just begun. The challenges of parenthood after 10 years of waiting. Sarah had spent years dreaming of motherhood, but now that it was here, it was nothing like she expected. Miracle was a fussy baby, always crying, hardly sleeping. The exhaustion hit Sarah like a storm. The same hands that had spent years lifted in prayer were now trembling from sleepless nights. One night, after hours of trying to soothe her wailing daughter, Sarah broke down. Tears streamed down her face as she rocked Miracle in her arms. Daniel woke up and rushed to her side. "Sarah, what's wrong?" She sniffed, trying to wipe her tears. "I love her, Daniel. I love her more than anything. But I'm so tired. I don't know if I'm doing this right." Daniel cupped her face gently. "You prayed for this, remember? And I know it's hard, but God gave her to us because he knew we could handle it." Sarah nodded, but the exhaustion remained. Then came the fear. Every fever, every cough, every small illness sent Sarah into panic. "What if something happens to her?" she whispered to Daniel one night as they lay in bed, Miracle sleeping between them. "Nothing will happen to her," Daniel reassured. "She's God's gift to us." But Sarah couldn't shake the anxiety. She had waited 10 years for this child. What if she lost her now? The test of faith continues. Just when life seemed to be settling, Daniel lost his job. The news hit them like a punch. Sarah stared at her husband, heart pounding. "What do we do now?" Daniel exhaled slowly. "We trust God." But trusting God was hard when there were bills to pay, mouths to feed, and a baby to care for. The whispers started again. "See how they suffered for years to have a child, now they are suffering to keep her." Even at church, some people who once celebrated with them started keeping their distance. One Sunday after service, Sarah overheard two women talking. "I heard Daniel lost his job. And with a baby to feed, maybe they should have used their waiting years to build wealth instead of just praying." The words stung, but Sarah clenched her fists and walked away. That night, she and Daniel knelt in their living room, holding Miracle between them. "God, you gave us this blessing," Daniel prayed. "We won't believe that you brought us this far just to leave us struggling. Please, make a way for us." And God did. A week later, Daniel received an unexpected call. A job offer, better than the one he had lost. Their test of faith had birthed another testimony. A second miracle? Life slowly returned to normal. Sarah adjusted to motherhood, Daniel settled into his new job, and Miracle grew into a healthy, joyful toddler. Then, something unexpected happened. Sarah started feeling unwell, fatigue, nausea, dizziness. She brushed it off as stress from parenting. But when the symptoms persisted, a thought crept into her mind. Could it be? She hesitated to take the test. She didn't want to be disappointed. But the moment she saw the two pink lines, she gasped. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "Another miracle." Daniel found her sitting on the bathroom floor, clutching the test. "Sarah? What is it?" She looked up at him, overwhelmed with emotion. "Daniel, I'm pregnant." For a moment, he was silent. Then he pulled her into a tight embrace. "God, you never fail." After 10 years of waiting for one child, they had conceived again, without any medical intervention. News spread fast. The same people who had once doubted them now marveled. Truly, when God blesses, he does it abundantly. Facing society again. While many rejoiced with them, not everyone was happy. Jealousy crept into some hearts. One evening, an old friend visited Sarah. She forced a smile, but her words were laced with bitterness. "So now you have 2 children. Must be nice. Some of us are still waiting." Sarah felt the sting of the comment. She had once been the one waiting, feeling forgotten. She reached for the woman's hand. "I know the pain of waiting," she said softly. "But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that God's time is always perfect. And when your time comes, it will be beautiful." The woman blinked back tears. "Do you really believe that?" Sarah smiled. "With all my heart." The final lesson. Months later, Sarah gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Testimony, because that was what their entire journey had been. At the naming ceremony, Daniel held his son in his arms and looked around the room filled with friends, family, and even those who once mocked them. "Our story is proof that God never forgets his children," he said. His timing may not be ours, but it is always perfect. Sarah, holding Miracle in her lap, added, "No matter how long the wait, when God finally moves, he does exceedingly above all we can ask or imagine." As their guests cheered and celebrated, Sarah looked at her growing family and whispered, "Thank you, Lord. It was all worth it." Admonition: trust God's timing. If you are in a waiting season, remember that Habakkuk 2 verse 3 says, "Though it linger, wait for it. It will certainly come." God's delays are not denials. He is writing a beautiful testimony for you. Keep trusting. Your miracle is on the way.